Arthur Mallory, a retired steelworker, lived humbly on a meager pension, clinging to faded memories and lost dreams. His one guilty pleasure was the lottery, a weekly ritual fueled by hope. But when Arthur spent his entire pension on tickets one fateful month, he shocked his quiet town. What followed was a whirlwind of heartbreak, revelation, and an unexpected twist of fate that would leave everyone in tears and teach a lesson on the power of hope, loss, and redemption. Arthur Mallory sat at his worn kitchen table staring at a stack of unpaid bills. At 72, his pension from decades as a steelworker barely covered rent and utilities. This month, even food seemed like a luxury. The thought gnawed at him, but Arthur had one comfort: the lottery. Every Friday, he spent a few dollars on a ticket, clinging to a fragile dream of a better life. This Friday, however, was different. Arthur wasn't just low on money, he was out of options. The bills piled up, his fridge sat nearly empty, and the landlord's patience wore thin. A wild idea took hold. Why not go all in? Why not spend everything he had left on a chance to change everything? It was reckless, but as Arthur thought of the life he'd led, a life of hard work and constant sacrifice, he convinced himself it was worth the risk. Coat and cane in hand, Arthur made his way to the corner store. When he handed over his pension check, the clerk, Sam, hesitated. "Arthur, are you sure? This is a lot of money." "I've lived long enough to know what it feels like to lose," Arthur replied, "but I've never known what it's like to win. Let me have this." Sam rang up the sale, sliding 2 heavy plastic bags of tickets across the counter. Arthur carried them home, the weight feeling oddly hopeful. For the next 2 days, he scratched, marked, and organized the tickets. Each one represented a sliver of possibility, a fragile dream. But as the pile of losing tickets grew, his hope began to waver. By Sunday night, Arthur sat surrounded by crumpled slips of paper. Still, the big draw loomed, and he clung to the belief that his luck might turn. On Monday evening, he tuned into the broadcast, his hands trembling as the numbers appeared on the screen. One by one, the tickets failed. When the final number was called, reality hit. Not a single ticket matched. Arthur stared at the blank television screen, the weight of his decision settling in. He had spent his entire pension and had nothing to show for it. The fallout was swift. On Tuesday, his landlord knocked, demanding overdue rent. The utility company issued warnings about disconnections. Arthur began selling off his few possessions: a battered armchair, his wife's wedding ring, his father's pocket watch, to scrape together what little he could. Each sale felt like losing another piece of himself. News of Arthur's gamble spread quickly in the small town. "Did you hear? Arthur Mallory spent his entire pension on lottery tickets," neighbors whispered. Some mocked him, others pitied him. Arthur, however, bore their judgment silently. Despite his crushing loss, he refused to regret his decision. "At least I tried," he muttered to himself one evening, sitting in his nearly empty living room. "At least I had hope." Unbeknownst to Arthur, his story was far from over. What felt like the end was only the beginning of a journey that would transform not only his life, but the lives of those around him. Arthur's world unraveled swiftly after his gamble. By the end of the week, the landlord handed him an eviction notice. The house he had called home for 2 decades now felt foreign, its walls a reminder of his choices. Electricity and water were cut off, leaving the place dark and cold. Arthur sat by the window most evenings, the tickets, once filled with promise, now scattered like ash. The town, as small towns often do, buzzed with gossip. At the diner, at the barber shop, even in church, people whispered about Arthur's folly. "He's lost his mind," some said. Others murmured, "Maybe we've all felt like doing something crazy once or twice." Despite the whispers, Arthur still walked to the corner store each morning for coffee. Sam, the clerk, avoided eye contact at first, guilt weighing on him for selling Arthur the tickets. But Arthur surprised him with a smile. "Don't worry, son," he said. I made my choice. Not your fault." Sam nodded, relieved, but pity for the old man lingered. Soon, others followed suit. The waitress at the diner began slipping an extra muffin onto Arthur's plate, and a neighbor left groceries on his doorstep. Arthur, though grateful, couldn't rely on these acts of kindness. He resolved to earn back what he'd lost. With no family close by and no assets left, Arthur scoured the town for work. Most hesitated to hire a man his age, but eventually, a retired mechanic named Charlie offered him a job. "I could use some help organizing the shop," Charlie said. The work was grueling, lifting, cleaning, and sorting, but it gave Arthur purpose. Each evening, his muscles ached, but he felt lighter. The small pay went straight to his debts, though it wasn't nearly enough. Meanwhile, Clara, the young waitress, couldn't stop thinking about Arthur. She admired his resilience and decided to help. One evening, she approached the diner's owner. "What if we organized a fundraiser for Arthur?" she asked. "A community dinner and raffle." The owner, a gruff man with a soft heart, agreed. "You spread the word, and I'll help with the rest." By the following week, flyers appeared around town. "Help Arthur Mallory, a community dinner and raffle," they read. At first, Arthur was mortified. "I don't need charity," he muttered. But as he saw Clara and others' efforts, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: gratitude. On the night of the event, the diner was packed. Families brought casseroles, pies, and rolls. Clara stood at the front, smiling. "Arthur may not have won the lottery," she said, "but he's part of this community, and we take care of our own." Arthur, seated in a corner, wiped his eyes, overwhelmed. As raffle numbers were called and donations collected, he realized the night wasn't just about money. It was about connection. For the first time since his loss, he felt hope. Little did Arthur know, this community effort was just the beginning of a larger journey, one he could never have imagined. Arthur awoke the morning after the fundraiser with a rare lightness in his heart. The funds raised were enough to keep him from eviction for another month, but what truly moved him was the warmth of the community. For a man who had spent so much of his life in quiet solitude, the outpouring of kindness was overwhelming. Still, Arthur knew his troubles weren't over. Determined not to squander the opportunity, he returned to work at Charlie's mechanic shop the next day, moving faster and lifting harder. Charlie noticed the shift and grunted approvingly. "You've got some fight left in you, Arthur," he said. Arthur also began noticing how the fundraiser had changed things. People who had once avoided him now greeted him warmly. Neighbors who whispered about his folly now offered small gestures: a bag of apples, a loaf of bread. Humbled, Arthur felt a growing desire to repay their kindness. Clara, the waitress who had spearheaded the fundraiser, continued to check in on him. "How's the old mechanic gig treating you?" she asked one morning. "Good," Arthur said. "Hard work, but it feels right." Clara smiled. "What if we turn that fundraiser into something bigger, something to help others in town who are struggling?" Arthur frowned. "I don't want this to be about me anymore," he said. "It wouldn't be," Clara replied. "You'd just be the spark that started it." Intrigued but hesitant, Arthur agreed to think about it. Clara, however, wasted no time. Within weeks, she and a group of community members formed the Mallory Fund, a community initiative providing emergency support for families in need. At first, Arthur felt awkward about the name. "Why me?" he asked Clara. "Because you showed us how easy it is to lose everything," she said, "and how important it is to help." The fund grew quickly. Clara organized events, a bake sale, a yard sale, even a small concert, all benefiting the fund. Arthur, though reluctant at first, found himself drawn into the effort. He set up tables, carried donations, and even gave a speech. "I made a mistake," he admitted. "I put my faith in luck when I should have put it in people. You've shown me I'm not alone, and I hope this fund can do the same for others." The crowd's applause was overwhelming, and for the first time, Arthur felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known in years. The fund not only kept him afloat, but gave him a way to give back. Over the next few months, the fund became a cornerstone of the town. It helped a single mother cover her rent, an elderly couple with their medical bills, and more. Each story deepened Arthur's commitment. As the fund grew, so did Arthur's dreams. "I don't want this to just be a charity," he told Clara. "I want it to be a legacy." Clara nodded. "Then let's make it one." Together, they began drafting plans to turn the fund into a nonprofit organization. It was ambitious, requiring resources and expertise they didn't yet have. But Arthur wasn't afraid. He had a community behind him and a purpose driving him forward. What had started as a desperate gamble was transforming into something greater, a testament to resilience, community, and second chances. Arthur's days were now filled with purpose, but the work ahead was daunting. Turning the Mallory Fund into a nonprofit required legal documents, a board of directors, and money. Clara, ever the optimist, took charge, rallying local leaders and even recruiting a lawyer who volunteered his time. Arthur, still carrying the weight of his past mistakes, felt out of his depth but determined to help. Arthur attended meetings, learned budgeting basics, and wrote thank-you letters to donors. It humbled him. The man who once gambled everything on luck was now immersed in planning and accountability. The fund's growing impact kept him motivated. One cold morning, he joined Clara to deliver firewood and blankets to a family whose heater had failed. Their gratitude moved him to tears. "This isn't just about me," Arthur said. Clara smiled. "It never was." Word of the Mallory Fund began spreading beyond the town. Local newspapers highlighted Arthur's journey from desperation to redemption. Donations trickled in from neighboring areas, and a local company pledged a grant if the fund achieved nonprofit status. The attention both inspired and unsettled Arthur. He was proud but uneasy being in the spotlight. Clara noticed his discomfort. "You're not alone in this," she reassured him. "This isn't just about your name. It's about what we're building together." Encouraged, Arthur threw himself into the work, visiting businesses for partnerships and speaking at events. The steelworker in him, the man who had always taken pride in hard work, was back. Not everyone was supportive. At a town meeting, a man stood and voiced his skepticism. "Why should we trust someone who wasted his life savings on lottery tickets?" Arthur stood, his voice steady. "You're right, I made a mistake, a big one. But every day since, I've worked to turn that mistake into something good. This fund isn't about me. It's about helping others. If you're willing to help, you'll see what it can do." The honesty resonated. Clara later told Arthur his speech inspired more donations than any fundraiser. When nonprofit status was approved, the board celebrated with a modest dinner. Sitting at the head of the table, Arthur felt pride, surrounded by those who believed in him. As the fund expanded, its impact grew. It offered scholarships, covered medical expenses, and supported small businesses. Arthur's name became synonymous with resilience. The same man once whispered about in shame was now greeted with respect. One evening, Arthur passed the shuttered steel mill where he had spent most of his life. The gates were rusted, the building quiet. "You never know where life's gonna take you," he murmured. The Mallory Fund was no longer just a safety net. It had become a beacon for the town. And for Arthur, it was proof that failure could lead to something far greater. Arthur's newfound purpose came with challenges. As the Mallory Fund expanded, so did the complexities of managing it. Board meetings grew longer, grant applications demanded more detail, and requests for assistance increased. For the first time in years, Arthur felt overwhelmed, not by loss, but by the responsibility of success. Clara noticed his fatigue during one meeting. "You don't have to do this alone," she said gently. Arthur nodded, knowing she was right. Slowly, he began delegating tasks to the board, trusting them to handle operations while he focused on outreach. It wasn't easy, but the team's dedication reassured him. One of Arthur's proudest moments came when the fund launched its first scholarship program. 3 high school seniors who had excelled despite difficult circumstances received the awards. At the ceremony, Arthur gave a speech that left the room silent. "I've made mistakes," he said, "but it's never too late to build something good. These scholarships aren't just about money, they're about believing in someone's future." The applause was thunderous, and Arthur felt fulfilled. Yet he couldn't shake the question. What would happen to the Mallory Fund after him? He raised this concern with Clara during a planning session. "It has to be bigger than any one person," he said. Clara agreed. They began seeking partnerships with larger organizations. Over the next few months, Arthur and Clara met with regional charities and philanthropic groups. Though the process was daunting, Arthur's authenticity won people over. He spoke not as a polished executive, but as a man who had lived the struggles he was trying to alleviate. One meeting resulted in a partnership with a nonprofit offering matching grants, significantly boosting the fund's resources. For Arthur, it was a milestone, proof that the fund had outgrown its humble beginnings. Despite these successes, moments of doubt crept in. Arthur often questioned whether he deserved the role he had stumbled into. One evening, as he walked through town, he ran into Mrs. Green, a widow the fund had helped. She grabbed his hands, tears in her eyes. "You've changed my life, Arthur. Don't you ever doubt what you're doing." Her words stayed with him. They reminded him the fund wasn't about erasing his mistakes, it was about making them matter. As the fund celebrated its 2-year anniversary, Arthur organized a town gathering to thank the community. Clara insisted he take the stage. "I thought the lottery was my way out," Arthur said. "I was wrong. My way out was all of you. You didn't let me fall, and now we're lifting others together. That's what this fund is, a chance to dream bigger." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Arthur's mind raced with new ideas. Mentorship programs, job training, even a community center. The steelworker in him thrived on building something lasting. The Mallory Fund was no longer just a safety net. It had become a cornerstone of the town's identity. Arthur's journey from despair to redemption wasn't over. Each step brought new challenges and opportunities to leave a legacy of hope. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid to look ahead. Arthur's resolve to grow the Mallory Fund fueled his days. Plans for mentorship programs and job training initiatives kept him busier than ever. Meetings with local businesses, brainstorming sessions with Clara, and late nights drafting proposals became routine. The once quiet man who had gambled everything on hope was now leading a movement. One of Arthur's most ambitious dreams was creating a community center. "Imagine a place where people can gather, learn, and grow," he mused to Clara one day. Her eyes lit up. "Workshops, safe spaces for kids, even free meals for those in need," she added. The idea quickly gained support. A local philanthropist, inspired by Arthur's story, donated a substantial sum to kickstart the project. Townsfolk pitched in, offering money, materials, and time. For Arthur, this was more than a dream. It was a chance to create something that would outlast him. Construction began, and Arthur was a constant presence at the site, helping with small tasks. "Don't overdo it, old man," a contractor teased, but Arthur only smiled. Each nail hammered felt like a step closer to redemption. The work reminded him of his days in the steel mill, where every piece he touched felt like it held purpose. The grand opening of the Mallory Community Center was a day of celebration. The entire town gathered to see the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Clara gave a heartfelt speech, crediting Arthur for inspiring the project. When Arthur took the stage, his voice was steady. "This center isn't just bricks and mortar," he said. "It's about hope. It's about proving we can rise again. With a little help." Applause erupted as Arthur cut the ribbon, his heart swelling with pride. The center opened its doors to after-school programs, adult education classes, and community meals. It quickly became the town's heartbeat, offering warmth and opportunity to those who needed it most. But the demands of managing the fund and the center weighed on Arthur's health. He felt the exhaustion creeping in, but he was reluctant to slow down. Clara noticed his fatigue and intervened. "You've done enough, Arthur," she said. "Let us take the reins." Reluctantly, he began delegating more. Arthur mentored younger board members, sharing his wisdom to prepare them to lead. He spent hours explaining the importance of the fund's mission, making sure the heart of its work would carry on. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where the Mallory Fund thrived without him. One evening, Arthur received a letter from a scholarship recipient. The young man thanked him for the chance to attend college and shared his dream of returning as a teacher. Tears welled in Arthur's eyes as he read the letter twice. This was the legacy he'd hoped for, not just changing lives but inspiring others to do the same. The community center quickly became a symbol of what the town could achieve together. It wasn't just a building, it was a place of transformation. Parents came for job training, children found safe spaces to play and learn, and neighbors bonded over shared meals. Each success story reminded Arthur that his risk, though reckless, had set the stage for something extraordinary. Though tired, Arthur felt a deep sense of contentment. He had turned his lowest point into a beacon of hope, and while his journey wasn't over, he was finally at peace with the path he had walked. The Mallory Fund, like the community center, was proof that a second chance could ripple outward, touching countless lives. Arthur's role at the Mallory Fund continued to evolve as the organization grew. The community center thrived, offering childcare, vocational training, and more. For Arthur, it was a source of pride, but it also signaled a shift. His presence was no longer central. Clara, now the de facto leader of the fund, noticed the changes in him. "You've built something incredible," she told him, "but maybe it's time to let go a little more." Arthur nodded, knowing she was right. The long days left him more tired, and the thought of stepping back was daunting but inevitable. What if the fund faltered without him? What if it lost the personal touch he'd worked so hard to instill? Clara approached him with an idea. "We should write down your story, not just for the fund but for the people you've inspired." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "A book? I'm no writer." "You don't have to be," Clara replied. "We'll help. It's about preserving your lessons." Intrigued, Arthur agreed. Clara and a local journalist began interviewing him, and Arthur spoke candidly about his life, from his days as a steelworker to the night he gambled away his pension. "I thought I was chasing a dream," he admitted. "Turns out I was looking for a purpose." The process was cathartic. Arthur reflected on moments he hadn't thought about in years. He spoke of his late wife, who would have loved the community center, and the people the fund had helped. The act of sharing eased his unease about stepping back. Clara and the board had grown into their roles, and younger members brought fresh ideas. Arthur began to see himself not as a leader, but as a guide. One afternoon, Arthur visited the community center and saw children painting murals of their dreams, doctors, artists, and teachers. He watched in silence, realizing the center had become a place of hope, just as he'd envisioned. That evening, he called Clara. "I think it's time," he said. "To step back," he replied. "The fund doesn't need me to keep moving forward. You and the team have it under control." Clara was quiet, then said, "Are you sure?" Arthur nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I've done my part. Now, it's your turn." In the weeks that followed, Arthur transitioned out of his leadership role, becoming an honorary advisor. The change was bittersweet, but it felt right. He spent more time at home, tending to his garden and reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The book, titled A Second Chance, The Story of the Mallory Fund, was published shortly after. It quickly became a local bestseller, with proceeds going to the fund. At a small signing event, people lined up to thank Arthur. One young woman said, "Your story gave me hope. It made me believe I can turn things around, too." Arthur smiled. "That's the real reward." The Mallory Fund continued to thrive, but Arthur's days grew quieter. He found peace in knowing the seeds he'd planted were bearing fruit. As he sat on his porch one evening, watching the sun set, Arthur felt a profound sense of fulfillment. His journey wasn't about chasing dreams. It was about creating them for others. And for the first time, he felt truly content. Arthur's days as an honorary advisor were quieter, but he found joy in mentoring the younger generation now steering the Mallory Fund. The community center thrived with job fairs, literacy classes, and youth mentorship programs, exceeding even his dreams. The town flourished, and Arthur took pride in seeing the fund's legacy grow. Clara often visited Arthur with updates. "We've just approved 5 more scholarships this year," she said one afternoon. Arthur smiled. "That's 5 more lives changed," he replied. Though he no longer played an active role in daily operations, his pride in the fund's accomplishments never wavered. One day, Clara arrived with surprising news. "Arthur, we've been nominated for a Regional Community Impact Award," she announced. While Arthur felt honored, he insisted the recognition belonged to the entire town. The award ceremony was held in a nearby city. On stage, Clara accepted the plaque but invited Arthur to speak. Nervously, he approached the microphone. "This fund isn't about me," he began. "It's about what people can achieve when they come together. I was lucky enough to have a second chance, and this is what we've built together." The audience erupted in applause, and Arthur felt humbled by the moment. As the fund's reputation grew, partnerships with neighboring towns began forming. Arthur received letters from people across the state, thanking him for inspiring them to create change in their communities. Each letter reminded him of the ripple effect of his journey. Yet, amidst the accolades, Arthur began to feel his age more acutely. His body, once sturdy, now demanded rest. Clara noticed his fatigue and gently involved him less, allowing him to enjoy his well-earned peace. One evening, Arthur sat by his window watching the sun dip below the horizon and wrote a letter to himself. "Dear Arthur," it began, "you didn't win the lottery, but you won something far greater. You learned that hope doesn't come from luck. It comes from people." The letter became part of a speech he gave at the community center's 3rd anniversary celebration. Though his voice trembled as he spoke, his words resonated deeply. "None of this would exist without all of you," he said. "The Mallory Fund isn't mine. It's ours, and it will carry on because we've built something bigger than ourselves." The standing ovation that followed was bittersweet. Arthur knew his role in the fund's story was nearing its end, but he felt comforted knowing its legacy was secure. In the months that followed, Arthur spent more time at home, surrounded by letters and memories. Clara continued to visit, bringing stories of the fund's ongoing impact. Each visit reminded Arthur that while his active role had diminished, his influence remained. As the town prepared for the community center's expansion, a project Arthur had envisioned years ago, he felt a quiet satisfaction. The center, like the fund, was a testament to resilience and unity. Though Arthur's days grew slower, they were filled with peace. The seeds he had planted continued to grow, touching lives he would never meet. It was enough. Arthur's twilight years were marked by reflection and a deep sense of fulfillment. The Mallory Fund and its community center had grown into institutions of hope, surpassing his initial vision. Yet, as time passed, Arthur grappled with questions about his legacy. Would the work he started endure? Would the values he fought for remain at the fund's heart? Clara sensed his concerns during one of her visits. "You've done everything to prepare us, Arthur," she reassured him. "The fund is in good hands. Your legacy is secure." Her words comforted him, but Arthur wanted to ensure the fund's mission stayed true to its roots. He called a special board meeting to share his hopes. "This fund was built on the idea of second chances," he said. "Never lose sight of that." The board members nodded, promising to uphold the principles that had guided the fund from the start. For Arthur, the meeting reassured him that his life's work would continue long after he was gone. As his health declined, Arthur spent more time at the community center, quietly observing the lives it transformed. He watched children laugh during programs, parents find support in job training, and seniors connect through gatherings. Each moment reminded him of why he had taken that reckless gamble years ago. He hadn't won the lottery, but he had found something far more valuable: purpose. One afternoon, Clara arrived with exciting news. "Arthur, the community center expansion is complete," she said. "We'd love for you to see it before the official opening." With Clara's help, Arthur visited the expanded center. It now featured a library, a technology lab, and spaces for mental health resources. Overwhelmed, he said, "This is beyond anything I ever imagined." The official opening of the expanded center was a town-wide celebration. Though frail, Arthur stood tall, surrounded by those who had supported the fund. During his speech, he said, "This center is proof of what we can accomplish together. It's a symbol of hope and resilience. I'm proud of what we've built, but even prouder of what you've made it into." As the crowd applauded, Arthur felt a profound sense of peace. His life, once defined by mistakes and regrets, had become a testament to redemption and purpose. In the weeks that followed, Arthur's visits to the center became less frequent. His body grew weaker, but his spirit remained strong. Clara and the board members visited often, updating him on the fund's progress. Arthur cherished these moments, knowing his influence still mattered. One evening, as he sat by his window watching the setting sun, Arthur wrote one final letter to the town. "Dear friends," it began, "this fund is not mine, it's yours. It belongs to everyone who believed in hope and community. Thank you for letting me be a part of it. Keep dreaming, keep building, and never stop helping those who need it most." The letter was read aloud at the next board meeting, leaving many in tears. It reminded Clara and the board of Arthur's vision and the responsibility they carried to honor it. Though Arthur's days grew short, he felt no fear. His work was complete, his impact immeasurable. The seeds he had planted would continue to grow, bearing fruit for generations to come. As he closed his eyes that night, Arthur felt only gratitude for the mistakes that led him here and the people who supported him. The morning after Arthur Mallory's passing, the town awoke to a quiet sadness. News spread quickly, and the community he had helped build came together in remembrance. Flowers, notes, and photographs were left outside the community center, creating a makeshift memorial. At the heart of it was Arthur's final letter, framed for everyone to read. Clara, now the Mallory Fund's director, organized a celebration of Arthur's life. "He wouldn't want us to mourn," she told the board. "He'd want us to keep moving forward." Invitations went out, and the response was overwhelming. On the day of the memorial, the community center overflowed with people. Clara stood at the podium, her voice steady despite the emotion. "Arthur taught us that failure isn't the end," she began. "It's an opportunity to rebuild and help others do the same. His story reminds us that hope can be found in the most unexpected places." Speakers shared memories, focusing not on Arthur's mistake but on his resilience and belief in people. A young woman spoke about how a Mallory Fund scholarship helped her become a doctor. An older man credited the job training program for helping him support his family. Each story was a testament to Arthur's impact. Clara unveiled a plaque dedicating the center to Arthur's memory. The words, "Mallory Community Center, built on second chances," were met with applause. For Clara, the day was bittersweet. She had lost a mentor and friend, but she knew his legacy would live on. In the months that followed, the Mallory Fund entered a new phase. Clara and the board expanded its programs, launching initiatives in technology, entrepreneurship, and mental wellness. The community center became a hub of innovation, and Arthur's story continued to inspire. One day, Clara visited Arthur's resting place, bringing flowers and updates about the fund. Nearby, children painted murals on a wall, the same project Arthur had admired years before. Clara smiled, imagining how proud he would be to see his legacy grow. Years later, on the Mallory Fund's 10th anniversary, the town held another celebration. The community center was bustling with life, its walls adorned with photographs and quotes from Arthur. Clara, now nearing retirement, addressed the crowd. "Arthur used to say he didn't win the lottery, but he found something far better. I think we're the lucky ones, for having known him and for carrying his dream forward." The applause was deafening, but Clara's thoughts were with Arthur. As she looked out over the crowd, she felt his presence, quiet, steady, and proud. Arthur Mallory's legacy wasn't in wealth or fame. It was in the lives he touched, the hope he sparked, and the community he built. Though he was gone, his story continued, proving that even the smallest act of hope can change the world.